Back to Mik'd Up. We are excited to introduce our next guest, reoccurring guest, fan of the show, friend of the show, Mike Rooney from D1 Baseball. Mike, I appreciate you coming back on the show. College baseball has finally ended. Have you recovered from the College World Series? Because that's a 2-week grind right there.
Yeah, it was great seeing you guys out there. I'm thrilled to be back. I kind of felt like you guys had cleared out my locker. Like I didn't know what was going on. First time guest, not an awesome feeling, but no, you're right. Omaha is awesome in a million ways. The challenge is you kind of go to Omaha exhausted already because the postseason. Yep. It's awesome. It's like an awesome exhausted, but definitely you come home. My if I'm being fully honest, my Czech liver light might have been on. A lot of social activities out there. Yes. Didn't do a Jello shot, thankfully though.
Well, I did enough.
We did enough for you.
Yeah, for both of you.
Thank you.
Obviously,
well
you saw how the LSU fans responded with that. It was, you challenge them, they follow through with a vengeance. And me and you had the pleasure of having a few drinks with you in the bar at the hotel and
Hilton Bar. Never be the same.
That would never be the same, right? We had some good conversations. What I noticed, obviously, throughout the World Series, and before we get to the draft, I want to kind of recap it a little bit. The games seemed like, up until the last 2 games of the thing, which is crazy because both those teams felt like they're two of the best teams in the country, if not the 2 best teams in the country. But until those 2 games, every game was super tight. It was 1-run games. Mm-hmm. Every game was in the balance in the 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning. And those last 2 games were kind of anomalies. And I thought, to me, that was the most impressive thing of Omaha. I thought every game showed the depth of college baseball. It showed the parity of college baseball. And showed the talent that is in college baseball. Did you kind of get that feeling throughout the course of the World Series?
Yeah, totally. Like, I think I said this to somebody where if you had let me have like a remote control and say, okay, Runes, you're picking Omaha this year. They're not earning their way in. Like, you get to pick the 8 teams. I don't think I would have been that greedy to pick those 8 teams, right? Like, it was unbelievable, all the elite teams, and then you throw in an Oral Roberts, who was a great story, and they were very, very good. All the star caliber players, and then, like the games backed it up, and, like the Skenes Louder game, one of the most hyped up college baseball games I can remember in at least 10 years. And it was unreal. The game was better than you thought it could be. So, I was a little disappointed at the way the field played with the wind howling in. But the truth is, when the wind was howling in at the hitters, that's when we had the best games. Yeah. So, yeah, it was remarkable. I can't, the ratings would show you that too. I mean, you guys probably saw the final game, 3.6 million viewers, which is, unprecedented for college baseball. Softball also had great ratings, but our ratings doubled softballs for the final game. And that's not me taking a shot at softball. Like, they're killing it. And then we kind of even went above and beyond that. So anyway, yeah, just what you said, Mikey's spot on. It was amazing.
Mike, you mentioned the Skenes and Louder game, and I think each and every year in and year out, there's a high chance that you'll be kind of blessed with the opportunity to watch, no matter the age, just 2 absolute superstars, whether they're hitters and or pitchers or wherever it is, kind of go at each other. But as we keep moving away from the COVID years, and then now you're going back to where we have a lot of older, experienced, more at-bats, more innings guys in the game. Do you expect to see the level of college baseball to kind of stay where it is, or do you expect it to kind of take a step back when we have a little bit of a younger game going forward?
Mitch, I think I don't know what to expect. There are teams that have done great with grad transfers and, like these 5th and 6th year players. I think about Boston College had a very old team this year. That is a real thing. What's this going to look like when those kids start to filter out of the system? Not every player is going to have a 5th year available. Some kids play every day as a freshman. But I would say this. I just think Major League Baseball is driving more and more talented kids to college baseball. And I think that's going to continue. I had this conversation with somebody today where if you look at the shortstops on the college side this year, guys like Jacob Gonzalez, Jacob Wilson, the kid Matt Shaw from from Maryland. I mean, these kids are going to be top 20 picks, and that's a lot of money. And I look at, there's like 12 high school shortstops that are going to be like top 50 picks. And those kids are infinitely better athletes than Gonzalez, Wilson, and Shaw, no offense. So it's like, why wouldn't you go to college? I mean, you're going to be the way this guy said it, he's like, you'd be a Porsche in a parking lot full of Tauruses, and now the college kids are really skilled and they're proven and all that stuff. But it's a long way of saying, Jared, that I think the talent level will continue to rise in college baseball. But I think it's a very fair point. What's it look like when the game's not as old as it was this year?
I think you're also making a good point in a sense of, not only, I guess I could say another way that the Major League game is driving players more to college to start right now is how quickly guys are being pushed ahead once they are in the Major League system or in the minor league system. Those guys, they're not spending 5 and 6 and 7 years in the minor league system, so why even waste your time going there? You might as well come spend some of your minor league time here in college, get better here, and it kind of gets you on a faster track to get to the big leagues once you get in the pro ball.
Oh, 100%. Because as you guys know, and I never played professional baseball, and I've always been on the high school coaching side and the college coaching side where I was just, my cards are on the table, right? Like, I think kids should go to college. I think the minor leagues are just incredibly difficult. Yep. And you take an 18-year-old kid and give him a bunch of money and then throw him into that pool, it's a recipe for disaster, unless your kid is Mike Trout, which is once in a generation. But all that said, it's just, Zach Neto played in the 2022 NCAA tournament in baseball, and a year later he's playing for the Angels. I mean, Ben Joyce, same thing. He's pitching in midweek games for Tennessee. Now he's pitching in big league games for the Angels. So it's crazy how fast kids are moving.
Yeah. Right, and obviously the draft's not as long anymore. They had 50 rounds. Now there's only 20 rounds. You have NIL. You have a lot of the college baseball brand is growing. As you said, 3.8 whatever million viewers in the last game of the national championship game. So now you may lose some of that older veteran experience, but you're going to gain a lot of this younger talent that maybe 5-6 years ago wasn't going to come to what they weren't going to step foot on campus. And I'm a pro college guy. I know Jared's a pro college guy. We've had long conversations with Dylan Cruz and his dad about how this is the greatest experience of his life and how he values this experience here. It's just, I'm with you. I think that there's a lot of reasons, but I think it's really good for the college baseball brand.
100% agree. And, it's, again, I think we've always had a great story to tell for kids that, hey, what the signing bonus is what it is, but let's just pretend it's not a lottery ticket for now. Let's just talk about what's the best path to make you a play and stay big leaguer. Not just get to the big leagues and tell your grandkids that they can look you up on Baseball Reference. That's your career. Make the real crazy money in the big leagues. I think it's undeniable that the highest percentage route is to go through college baseball. And again, the SEC deserves a lot of credit for this. I think a lot of kids that are committed to SEC schools look at the minor leagues and say, you want me to go where when I could go to Baton Rouge and play in front of 10,000 kids or 10,000 people for 3 years? And, NIL money, as you made that point, that kind of levels the playing field just a tiny bit more. So, there's just a lot of positives on the college side.
Obviously, LSU came in this year super talented. Now, some of the guys were homegrown. They were recruited there. They were developed, and some of the guys transferred in, right? Obviously, Paul Skenes came in. Dylan Cruz came in before the year as the number one prospect in the draft. Paul Skenes was a projected first-rounder, not projected top 5 before the season started. Then, obviously, he took his game to a different universe. Yeah. Was the best pitcher that I have seen. I know people continue to compare him to Garrett Cole, which I think is the best comparison, but I think right now coming out of college, he's better than Garrett Cole was in college just with the grouping of pitches that he has. And now I could be biased, obviously, but he's super talented. With the draft on Sunday, right, LSU has a ton of guys. Paul Skenes and Dylan Cruz are ranked number 1 and 2 in D1 baseball's top 150 college rankings, right? You also have Ty Floyd at 29, which I'm so happy he's in that area because I'm a huge Ty Floyd fan. I want to get your opinion on him. You have Grant Taylor at 68, which I think if he was healthy, he'd be a lot higher. Trey Morgan, and you round that out with Trey Morgan at 73, right? For the LSU fans watching our show or that's going to watch this clip when we cut it, where can we expect these guys to be taken in the draft? Obviously, Paul Skenes and Dylan Cruz top 5 first round. Can you see Ty Floyd maybe sneaking into the supplemental round? Like, what's the ceiling? What's the floor? Where do you see these guys being taken in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, you guys know the one caveat for the Major League Draft is that signability matters because, there's 5 guys going for the top pick. It's Dylan Cruz, it's Paul Skenes, it's Wyatt Langford from Florida, and there's 2 high school kids, the Walker Jenkins kid from North Carolina and then Max Clark from Indiana. And, the Pirates might try to cut a deal with one of the high school players and then use that money to get some higher-end kids later in the draft. So that's the one wonky part of the baseball draft. But I think if you're talking about who are the best players, there's no question the 3 safest picks are, Cruz, Skenes, and Langford. And I just don't know how you wouldn't take Paul Skenes. I mean, Dylan Cruz is a phenomenal player, one of the best college players I've ever seen. But Paul Skenes is a generational talent. Like for me, it's Mark Pryor, it's Steven Strasburg. Yeah. You mentioned Garrett Cole. Hey, Garrett Cole was like 18 and 17 in college, and he was dynamite. But like Paul Skenes was appointment viewing this year. Like It was crazy what he did. So if I was the Pirates, I don't know how you live with yourself not taking Skenes 1-1. That would be my choice. Here's the thing about Ty Floyd, who you brought up. That fastball is such a special pitch. And, like the 17 strikeouts in the finals, like that was just crazy. But even in the fall, when LSU really was thinking of Ty Floyd as, I don't know, is he like our moment of truth reliever or is he in the rotation? This is, when Grant Taylor was still healthy and maybe you still thought Thatcher Hurd was going to be weekend rotation from the jump. I mean, Ty Floyd's fastball, I feel like you could put that pitch in a big league game right now, and as long as hitters only got one look at it, he would totally be fine. Yeah. And he's really athletic. I think there's more there. I mean, he's like this year's Cade Horton, where I think he made a lot of money at the College World Series.
I was about to ask you that. I could see the Rays drafting him. He seems like he's a prototypical Tampa Bay Rays pitcher. A lot of ride, pitch fastball up in the zone. Here, let's tunnel that with a changeup and the breaking ball. It's just, I came up through Tampa. I saw how they like pitchers. It just feels like that's something that someone that they would go after. But I don't know. I think he's super talented. Jay, you got one for him?
You mentioned the top pick and how there's like 5 guys, basically that's viable for that spot, right? Mm-hmm. We all talked earlier a couple weeks ago, and we are pretty much in the same boat. The same boat when it comes to those the 2 that we see should be going there. Can you explain the actual like situation behind what the economical choice would be for the Pirates to take someone outside of a Cruz and or Skenes at that top spot?
Yeah, so as I understand it, somebody could just Google the numbers, and I might even be able to Google it while I'm talking. But like the MLB has draft pools, and so each pick that you have has an allotment to it. And so what happens is, if you're the Pirates and your overall pool of money is like $16 million, I think that's what it is. It's like 16.1. Basically what happens is the first pick in the draft is also assigned a value. And so, let's say that the top pick is assigned this value, $9.7 million. I'm reading it off of Baseball America right now. So $9.7 million, like Dylan Cruz, who I think is represented by Boris, they might say, hey, like if you're taking Dylan Cruz, we're expecting 9.7. Like this kid is as good of a player as we've seen in this draft in the last however many years. If you're taking him 1-1, we're expecting the 1-1 bonus. Whereas, maybe the high school kids would say, hey, we would at 1-1, we would take $8 million. It's still a crazy amount of money. And then the Pirates, if you do that math, they have 1.7 from that pick that they could move down in the draft, and they could go to their 3rd round pick and say, hey, I heard your price tag is $3 million. We got $3 million for you. So don't let anybody else draft you. So, all this stuff is under the table, and, it's certainly not in the spirit of the whole deal, but, that's how this draft runs. And so that's the bottom line is if you take Skenes or Cruz, their representatives would send a message to teams like, hey, if we get picked 1-1, here's what our number is. And maybe some other people would say, hey, if I slide to 5, I'm only getting 7 million. So yeah, I would take a shave at 1-1.
Because of signability, do you see like a realistic world in those top 5 where you get through pick 3 and neither one of the LSU superstars or I say either one or both of the LSU superstars are still on the board?
Well, because the Nationals are picking second, like if the Nationals are going to take Cruz or Skenes, whoever slips to them, I can't think of any scenario where the Washington Nationals would not take one of those two guys. Because the only way would be if they evaluated Wyatt Langford as maybe a little bit ahead. Like I look at Langford and Cruz as like two different flavors of ice cream. Yeah. I personally would choose Dylan Cruz, but I could see where somebody would say, hey, like I like Langford better by like the tiniest of margins. I'm taking Langford. Like I don't think that's an outrageous take. It's not the one it's not for me, but I don't think that's crazy talk necessarily. That's the only way. I don't again, like this is where if I was the Pirates, like I'm watching Skenes and I'm like, yeah, what's not to like? Like your locker room gets better the second he walks in there as a rookie, right? Yeah. It's like, I mean, the kid was at the Air Force Academy. He's throwing 1,000,000 miles an hour. And, the improvements he made year over year are incredible. So I don't know, like Cruz and Skenes to me are these generational type of players where it would be tough to sleep if I passed on them.
Grant Taylor had Tommy John. Grant Taylor was supposed to be a top 20 pick in the draft, right? Tommy John is looked at now
it's a rite of passage.
Yeah, a lot more favorably than it was looked at 15 years ago. The technology, the way doctors are able to, guys are able to recover from it, the way the surgery is performed. Where can we expect Grant Taylor to get drafted if you would have to guess? And what type of money would that give to him at, being that he is coming off injury and really hasn't had a ton of innings thrown in college, which I think could maybe benefit him in the long run.
Yeah, it's interesting, like Mikey. So I think the thing when I've talked to scouts about this, no one is scared of drafting a kid who's already had Tommy John surgery. They're not even scared of doing it in the first round. But what happens is they're gonna take the evaluation that happened before he was hurt. And I think that's the challenge for Grant Taylor is he didn't pitch 1,000,000 innings before he was hurt. I would agree with what you just said, Mikey, that you are kind of getting a fresh arm, like in some ways that's a positive thing for Grant Taylor. So I think the question becomes, what's his number? What's a signable number for Grant Taylor, and how does that mesh up with where that team evaluated him before he got hurt? He's going to be a fascinating one because coming out of the fall, people like you couldn't get someone to mention LSU without mentioning Grant Taylor's name. I mean, He was such a hot name coming out of the fall and in the fall. So he's going to be a tough one to predict, but certainly it's a first-round talent. It's just going to be a matter of the signability and the team's evaluations match up there.
There's a couple other guys I feel like, very well-known players from LSU that had big moments throughout the course of their careers, right? One of those guys is Trey Morgan. Trey, I feel like, is a very tricky prospect. I think he's extremely athletic. He has great bat-to-ball skills. He plays an unbelievable first base. He showed that he can play the outfield. Can he play center field? I don't know. I think that would help him as far as his draft prospects go. Where can he realistically get taken in the draft? I don't think he's a first-rounder. I don't even think he may be a second-rounder. I think, to me, in my mind, maybe a third-rounder is his ceiling, but I could be wrong, and I hope I am. But I just don't – I don't know what scouts think of him.
Yeah, he's a curious one too because I think you're drafting him thinking I'm getting a big leaguer, but I don't know how much ceiling I'm getting. And the thing I don't know is, some of these teams are so intertwined with the metrics. Yeah. And Trey Morgan might be one of those guys where the metrics teams look at him and say, hey, there's extreme bat to ball here. And we feel like our strength and conditioning program and maybe some player development on the hitting side can help him tap into more power. And he's always going to have the bat to ball. And we know, like, you could put him in a big league game at first base right now, and he might be better than what you're throwing out there defensively. I mean, it's crazy good defense at first base, as you know. So the third round feels probably about the right place. He could slip a little bit. That would surprise me, but I'm going to be curious about them. I think your instincts are right, though, Mikey. Third round feels about the place for him, and you just feel like you're drafting a big leaguer, and what kind of ceiling you're going to get is to be determined.
And I think people look at third round in the baseball draft like, oh, that's not elite. I'm like, well, that's the third pick of that team's draft. Like, that's still somebody that they value. Third round's very hard to get drafted in. Like, that's a very good spot.
Also, like you mentioned, he may be one of those guys that gets that over slot because of the draft pool thing. Type of thing.
Yeah.
And my next question is, with the draft only being 20 rounds, right? I think that hurts a lot of the older guys because they don't get you don't get the 25th round draft, senior draft, and get an opportunity, and maybe, hey, we're going to push you as fast as we can, see where you struggle or if you don't struggle. And, so LSU's got a few of those guys, right? A few of the guys that put up some pretty big numbers at LSU, that put up some pretty big college numbers, that are older guys that are going to be eligible for the draft. Do you see any of those guys like Beloso, Jobert, Dugas, any of those guys getting drafted? Then Jordan Thompson is another curious one I have a question for too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing, you guys know how the draft works in baseball. Like, you always hear the old line that, hey, they really draft 3 players per year, and then it's lottery tickets and guys that are going to play around those kids.
Right.
For, the team's really focused on their first 3 picks. But I think any of those names, you could dream on any of them. Like Gavin Dugas is, he's turned himself into a really offensive second baseman. Like, why not take a flyer on him in the 16th round? And just like you said, Mikey, like, hey, as long as he plays good, he stays in the system. And then, Brain Jobert, like, I think he's a lot you could dream on too. Like, he looks the part. And, he's been streaky from what I've seen. Yep. But the days where he's running into balls, he looks like a guy that could play for a long time. I probably can't be objective about Jordan Thompson because I've come full circle on him. In the beginning of his career at LSU, I was pretty critical of him. And then at the end, I was like, you guys were all part of that Twitter thing. And, it's like, there's no way you don't play him in that last game. Like, there's no way, no chance. The only way he doesn't play in the final game is if somebody kidnaps Jay Johnson. Yeah. That's the only scenario where he wouldn't play.
Can you imagine putting a guy off the bench for the first time all year? Hey, you're going to start in the biggest game of your life right now for the first time. Like, come on now. That's
of everyone in that dugout.
Yeah, that's just not realistic. Like, I just can't. You can't.
Yeah, great way to freak your team out.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No doubt.
We were sitting here talking about this, and if you had a crystal ball, could you name another pick that feels more sentimental and more right than a former Air Force Academy player going to play in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. at some point?
I mean, he instantly becomes the marketing, like...
I mean, that's marketing. Yeah. That's marketing literally just embedded into it for you.
What a great story. And you know what's really cool about that, too, is that, like every once in a while you see the people that just don't want to like Paul Skenes, that are like, wow, he left the Air Force Academy, and just like, whatever. You don't know whether to block those people or actually engage in the conversation. But, and then you read articles like Leah Van wrote about, and the Air Force people can't wait to talk about how great Paul Skenes was to them and, how much they're rooting for him. But, yeah, I guarantee you, Jared, if Paul Skenes is there at 2, there's no way in Hades that the Nationals don't take him. I mean, you could put that. There's no way Paul Skenes slips past number 2.
Yeah.
You talked about, people just don't do their research. You talk about Paul Skenes and people, what they say about, he left the Air Force. He had to, or he wasn't going to be able to go get drafted and pursue professional baseball. Like, he had to leave, or he was going to have to go and do his tour and do that whole thing. So for his career and what he wanted to do, I don't think he really wanted to leave, but he had to leave. And I think he was happy that he got here. Spinning away from LSU, right? Who's a guy that's in this draft that, maybe before the year started wasn't as highly touted as he's going to be now? Who made the biggest jump, whether it be, I guess college guy. What college guys made the biggest jump from the start of the year till now?
Kyle Teal of Virginia, who we all saw in Omaha, is going to be a top 10 pick. And I was really off of him coming into the year. Virginia went to Omaha his freshman year in 21, and then this year clearly. And he was an outfielder his freshman year. And then last year he caught, and it just was a mess. You know, he's really athletic. He was almost too athletic to catch. He was kind of a spaz back there, and he just he was distracting umpires. You know, he's got an incredible arm, but we were throwing it all over the place, and it was just a lot, and it affected his offense. Kyle Teal hit 280 last year, and then this year, you know, he played for Team USA last summer, and then this year it all came together. And you know, when you'd watch him, he was the best player on the field a lot of times. So Kyle Teal is a guy for me. He's famous, but if you had told me he's going to go top 10 overall in January, I would have said, oof, I don't know, man. That he's going to have to really make some strides for that to be the case, and the truth is he has.
Mike, I know you're time sensitive. I know you got your own podcast to do here in 19 minutes. I'm going to let you go off after this question. Yes. LSU hired Nate Yeskie as their pitching coach, right? Nate coming from A&M. He pitched, or he's a pitching coach under Jay Johnson at Arizona. What's your take on that? Do you like the hire? Do you not like the hire? Obviously, it's a good fit because they're familiar with each other, but give me your take on that, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah, I don't like the hire. I love the hire.
Okay, there we go. Love that.
Nate is unbelievable. You know, last time a non-SEC school won the national title, Nate Yeskie was calling pitches for that team. Right. That was Oregon State. You know, those Oregon State teams were epic. And, you know, Nate is a relentless recruiter. He's got old school competitiveness with new school teaching and training. And, you know, him and Jay have worked together before. They know each other really well. I think it's a gangbusters hire. You know, I think it really, not that I was worried about Jay, you know, making a great hire. Clearly, you know, he's just on a different level, the way Jay operates his entire program. But I didn't see this coming, but it makes perfect sense, and it's a home run.
Runes, I appreciate you as always. I love when you come on the show. Your insight's great. I think you understand the concept of this show. You're a personality, A+ clubhouse guy. You have it on your Twitter profile. You're A++ in makeup, and I respect that, and I appreciate that. Man, enjoy the rest of your night. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hopefully you had a great 4th of July, and I can't wait to have you back on.
You got it, fellas. Thanks for having me.
Yep, appreciate you.
See ya.
See ya.